In this video, I'm going to develop a one-point perspective from a freehand sketch. Use paper from your drawing pad because it's tough and you'll probably be doing some erasing. I've already made an initial freehand sketch. It's really rough, but it's enough to get a start on my drawing. I drew with a marker so it'd be easier to take a photograph of, but unfortunately I drew on top of used paper, so there's letters on the other side. I'm going to transfer just the basic information that I need in order to begin my one-point perspective. The horizon line is at my eye level, and I'm standing up at the end of my dining room table. So there's the corner of the ceiling and the wall, and the middle of the drawing, and the wall on the right-hand side. The upside-down V shape above my finger is the vanishing point for the drawing, and there it is on my sketch paper. What I'll do next is use a ruler to make some of the lines a little bit more straight. I find that I can freehand against a lightly drawn straight line with a ruler pretty readily, so I'm just drawing some light guidelines here. Then I'll go back downstairs and stand in the same place and draw my drawing using these guidelines as my starting point. Notice that all the lines converge on one point. I'll make a quick comparison with my original sketch and then erase some of the extra lines. The most important line that I'm going to draw is the floor at the far wall. This sets the proportions for the whole rest of the drawing, actually. The distance on the paper from the vanishing point to the floor line is what really sets the size of the back wall and the fireplace, and by default changes the whole rest of the drawing. Obviously, I don't draw this fast. This section of video is sped up 4 times just to make the process of me laying out the kind of grid or framework of the drawing easier for you to see. You should notice that I'm drawing all different parts of the drawing. I don't just concentrate in one place. I need to get pretty much everything blocked in order for the drawing to make sense. And it's a lot easier to make changes if you haven't made one spot really perfect yet. Back to normal speed. What I'm going to do next is run back downstairs and draw on top of this grid. Things are starting to make a lot more sense spatially now. I have this structure that I can lay more detail on top of. You can tell that I'm drawing, say, the bowls on the table in front of me, and the truth is I move all of that before I finish. So don't be too committed to anything yet. Keep drawing lightly and draw things as accurately as you can get them. Notice that I'm not being too fussy with any of the lines because I fully intend to go back and fix the ones that are crooked later. I'm really just trying to get objects in the space that I'm building. My new drawing is wider than my original sketch. I think it's just because the paper is bigger. In a one-point perspective, horizontal lines are horizontal and vertical lines are vertical. So I'm going to use this T-square in a triangle and quickly draw these lines in. If you don't have equipment like this, you can just use a ruler and get as close as you can. Nothing has to be perfect. The idea is that you're building the space and then you're going to make a drawing within the space that you've delineated using perspective guidelines. I actually think all this is fun. It's really a challenge to make space believable in 2 dimensions. Here what I'm doing is connecting the diagonal lines back to the vanishing point. So here's the edge of the table, and I'm drawing in some rough idea of where the floor tiles are. And some more diagonal lines. Actually, all these things end up getting changed. They're a little bit out of proportion. So some of what I'm doing here, I'll just erase 5 minutes later. You might see that I erase quite a bit. I'm actually going to draw right on top of all this, and I can erase the graphite to make it a little bit lighter. And by the time I put the drawing on top, the guidelines will more or less disappear. Here's a bit of cleanup that I'm doing. I'm not trying to draw everything that's in this space. It's a bit too complicated. So I'm just focusing on the essential parts that delineate what this part of my house looks like. And so here we go, sped up again. About half of the time on this project was making the framework and doing the sketching. And the other half is, I guess, what you would call the rendering of the drawing. And I did actually most of this with a mechanical pencil, so I didn't have to stop and sharpen it. Most of the values are developed using this scribbling technique where I kind of draw lines going in different directions. And it's really hard for the camera to pick up how dark things are. The drawing is darker than it looks here. A little bit further into the drawing, this is back down to how fast I actually draw. And you can see that I kind of just dance around and draw a little bit here and draw a little bit there. It's important for me to not try and make any one spot in the drawing perfect. I'm trying to catch the idea of what the space looks like rather than, say, draw a perfect knob on this little cabinet. Perfection is not required here. It's the idea, the overall idea of a convincing space that matters. Remember that you're doing this because you like drawing and you want to get better at it. Notice that I'm drawing freehand on top of the lines that I drew with the T-square and the triangle. So all the mechanical lines are getting drawn over freehand, and this will soften the drawing up so it doesn't look so rigid. Make sure to indicate the textures of things in your drawings. This is clearly a brick wall of some sort, and this is a kind of shorthand for drawing bricks, I guess. It's important that you can see that it's distinctly different from the wall. I am paying attention to where light is coming in through the window and how I see the space, but I also have to get the floor darker and finish with some more textures. I also use the eraser to bring back some of the brighter highlights before I finish. There's very little smudging in this drawing, mostly just the floor. I also decided to crop the drawing a little bit, so you can see I drew some lines and stopped drawing at a certain point. You don't have to render the entire page. You could focus on certain areas within your drawing. I switched the video to black and white here because that is the way I started to see the world after I was drawing for an hour. I think what these are kind of finishing touches, adding a little bit more value and a little bit more detail in just a few spots. And here's the finished drawing. I hope this helps you to figure out how to approach your own project. I really had fun doing this. I hope you do too.